Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I extend to you a very warm welcome to today's conference. ED Energy World, together with Oracle India, is organizing today's virtual conference on the topic Revolutionizing the Utility Sector with Technology Disruption and Innovation. The digital revolution happening currently is primarily driven by emerging technologies and consumer expectations, forcing the utility sector to reduce the utilization of legacy networks and generation capacity. For energy companies, this digital transformation is to provide customers with constantability and services through a range of value-added deliverables in addition to competitive energy rates. Therefore, efficient, customer-focused business models supported by agile technology platform are clearly the need of the hour. This virtual conference aims to highlight how analytics and digital technology transform the utility sector while creating immediate opportunity in the power sector as a whole. Smart metering, including data access, billing transparency, energy efficiency, performance, and compliance. In this conference, you will witness the industry leaders throwing lights on the key trends, digitalization, prepaid meters, policies, reforms, and so on. Without taking any further time, allow me to introduce the first session. That is a fireside chat on the topic, an outlook on power distribution reforms. To take the discussion ahead, I would like to invite Ms. Vibhuti Garg, energy economist, Lead India, IEEFA, who will be moderating this insightful fireside chat. It's my pleasure to further invite the panelists, Mr. R. Lakshmanan, IAS, CEO of REC Limited, and Mr. Subrata Das, Senior Director, Utilities Business, Oracle India. With that, a very warm welcome to all of you. Now, without any further delay, I would request Ms. Garg to start off with today's discussion. Over to you, Ms. Garg.
A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fireside chat on an outlook on power distribution reforms. Today, we are joined by two esteemed panelists who needs no introduction. We have Shri R. Lakshmanan, Chief Executive Officer of REC Power Development and Consultancy Limited, who is looking after stress asset management, IT, admin, and estate coordination, and also monitoring of government program like DDUG, JY, Saubhagya Scheme, Uday, and Power for All. We also have Mr. Subrata Das, Senior Director, Oracle India. Mr. Das leads the utility business for Oracle in India. In this role, he's responsible for revenue growth, thought leadership, market share, and customer success across the electricity, gas, as well as water utilities. A seasoned professional with a career spanning over 30 years, Subrata Das has deep industry knowledge across utilities, tax and revenue, as well as urban local bodies, etc., across technology giants like Oracle, IBM, and SAP. A very warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Vibhuti.
Just to set the context, distribution sector is the backbone of the electricity sector. However, it has also been one of the weakest link as the sector is reeling under huge losses. The distribution sector has been bailed out a few times in the past, but the result has not been up to the mark. In November 2015, Ministry of Power, launched Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana, which is famously called the Uday scheme, which envisaged the financial turnaround of the distribution companies, also operational improvement, as well as reduction in the cost of generation of power. Further, it set the goals of deploying more and more renewable energy and increasing its share by all the discoms, as well as promotion of energy efficiency and conservation. While the scheme started on a good note, but again, we saw that, the distribution companies are again reeling under huge losses. So despite various financial restructuring measures, the performance of the discoms has remained weak, with their losses kind of surpassing the Uday level of 0.4% of GDP in 2018-19. In addition, their long-term debt has again started increasing since 2017-18, surprising again the pre-Uday level by 2018-19 and rising further in 2019-20. If you just look at some of these numbers, the distribution companies have accumulated losses of over rupees 5 lakh crore and regulatory assets worth rupees 1.2 lakh crore. And the outstanding payment owed to Gencos by Discom as per the Prapti portal is more than rupees, again, 1.1 lakh crore. So given this backdrop, I would like to start with Mr. Lakshmanan, you. If you can share details, there's another package that is being announced and which is in the making of 3 trillion rupees per sector reform package. How different is it going to be from the earlier schemes, and how would it really help in turning around the distribution sector? Over to you, Mr. Lakshmanan.
Yeah, Vibhuti. In fact, like what you have set out as a context is relevant, and it's a concern with which Government of India and Ministry of Power is working on. And the Revamped Distribution Sector Scheme, which was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister recently, this envisages like there are 2 or 3 aspects to the scheme. The primary objective of the scheme is to improve the financial viability and health of the distribution companies. That is one aspect to it. And second is like to improve the overall quality and reliability of power supply to the consumers. The access piece has been, resolved in the last 5 years, but then the quality and reliability aspect needs to be taken care of. So these are the 2 broad objectives with which the scheme has started off. And within that, I think on the financial side, the overall targets are, bringing the AT&C losses down to 12 to 15% and ACS ARR gap to 0 or so. So how is it different from the earlier schemes? One is like on the financial support that is being envisaged under this scheme. One major portion of the support goes towards the prepaid smart metering or the advanced metering ecosystem that it envisages to create. So this is one of the key interventions that is under the scheme thought of or being taken to ensure that the entire cash flow structure of the DISCOM shifts from a postpaid mode to a prepaid mode. And second, it also envisages a smart metering ecosystem, which will bring in a very advanced, robust digital platform for the metering, billing, collection side of the DISCOM, which is a key concern on the billing efficiency and collection efficiency front. And along with this, like there is a proposal to push advanced analytics platform and a unified billing software to go along with this, which will probably like bring about a digital transformation of the utility. And close to 36 DISCOMs have got their action plans and DPRs sanctioned under the RDSS scheme, and they are moving ahead with the implementation. And on the other side, there are specific targeted interventions from the infra side for reducing the losses. So this is being targeted right up to the feeder level so that the investment is rightly targeted and there is improvement on the technical and the commercial losses which are happening on the infrastructure side. And this will also bring about improvement in the quality and reliability of power supply that is ultimately being delivered to the consumers. And on top of this, there is a set of governance reforms that is tagged to these scheme funding, which is actually a precondition for the DISCOMs to avail funding under the scheme. So on that aspect, I think this scheme is like very different from the earlier schemes in terms of laying down 7 or 8 preconditions which the DISCOMs have to achieve. It's not only the DISCOMs, this scheme also recognizes that the distribution space involves state government, the state electricity regulatory commissions, and the DISCOMs. They 3 together, play a role to deliver a stable and robust distribution system. So in that aspect, these preconditions involves all these stakeholders. For example, like having a timely tariff, timely true-ups, and no regulatory assets, and timely audited accounts. So it brings in a basic, discipline in the functioning of the DISCOMs, regulators, and the state governments. On the state government side, especially like payment of the subsidies and the current power purchase, current government department dues in time, and also liquidating the arrears at the beginning of the scheme. So whatever arrears on subsidy payable to the DISCOMs or the government department dues payable to the DISCOMs, as on 1/4/21, it is to be liquidated over the scheme period. So that is over the next 4 years. So already states have committed to this right up to the state cabinet. So this proposals are approved up to the state cabinet level. and then it is being approved by Government of India. So there is a buy-in from the state government as well, and this has started showing results. Like in fact, if you see, as we stand today, the tariff orders have been issued for most of the states for the current year 22-23, and only a couple of states where tariff petition is yet to be filed. Those are very smaller states. Otherwise, like even many states which do not have tariff orders for the last 4 years, 5 years, they have now set their house in order. So that's a very positive development. Similarly, on the true up front also, which is again very essential, so that whatever are the actual costs are trued up on a year-on-year basis, so that that mitigates the cash flow gaps that has happened during the year. So streamlining of the true up orders is also taking place. So on all these fronts, there is a concerted effort, and similarly, like on the infrastructure funding and smart meter funding, the state government along with the discoms have to promise an action plan for this turnaround. So that involves financial sustainability related parameters, where they have parameters like AT&C losses, ACS ARR gap, timely liquidation of the arrears of subsidies and government department dues, putting in place a billing software. And on the reliability side, SAIFI, SAIDI, and the data being reflected on the national feeder monitoring system, timely publishing of the energy accounts right up to the feeder and DT levels, as mandated by the new energy accounting rules brought out by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And similarly, on the infrastructure front, there are physical targets which needs to be achieved. So put together, distribution company has to achieve year on year these set of preconditions which we discussed, and also deliver on the action plan for loss reduction and financial turnaround on different parameters, which I just, a few which I highlighted. So they will have to achieve a 60 marks upon 100 on these, action plan parameters, and also adhere to the mandatory preconditions. So then only like they will be able to, get funding under this scheme on a year-on-year basis. So this has already, motivated or activated the discoms in terms of taking steps to put their, things in order. And they've also now started coming out with tenders for procurement of smart meters and procurement of infrastructure. So that's how this scheme is proceeding. So we are quite, hopeful and, that this should bring about the desired changes going forward.
Great. Very promising to hear that states are already motivated and they already have started, putting their house in order by starting procuring meters, as well as doing all the steps that are required to reduce not only the AT&C losses, but also at the same time improve their financial health. Coming to you, Mr. Das, there has been a lot of emphasis under this scheme again on advanced analytical platform. And as a major utility technology vendor, what are your views on this scheme, and any areas where you would like the think tank to be diving a little more deeper?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I would like to thank ET Energy for giving me the opportunity and absolute honor to be sharing the days with Mr. Lakshmanan. To answer this question, Vibhuti, we need to go back a little in time in terms of where the discoms have come thus far in terms of their technology adoption. So if you look at the reforms in the last decade, the policy think tank, I believe, has been extremely astute and very specific in defining the technology roadmap for the distribution sector. Now, if you're starting, 10, 12 years back, looking at the RAP-DRP program, which typically focused on the revenue management systems and GIS-based consumer indexing, etc. And I think a few years later, it laid stress on operational efficiencies under the IPDS scheme. And then we had the energy efficiency measures that were adopted under the Ujala and the Aditya schemes. And finally, culminating in what we have today in the RDSS scheme. So whether it's billing innovation, whether it's the need to adopt an enterprise resource planning for building operational efficiencies within the DISCOM, starting from their human capital, their expenditure management, their budgeting and planning, energy accounting, and of course, the full supply chain, managing that. The DISCOMs, under the guidance of the ministry, have proceeded in that vector. They have also, built distribution management systems for ensuring equitable and reliable power supply, and then moved on to the demand side management aspect of it uh, uh, in a very positive manner. And today, if you look at the AMI ecosystem that's getting built and the AMI adoption, mission in the country, the focus is essentially on the smart meter adoption to further drive granularity in the business. And altogether, this presents a very great thought out roadmap. Now, what lies ahead? Now, there are obviously gaps in the entire value chain. And obviously, the execution of the overall strategy laid out by the Ministry of Power could be better. But there are certain areas where I think we are building the foundation today, take a major leap forward from a discom innovation perspective. And the way I see it is essentially in the asset space. So if you look at the IoT, wave in the country and driving predictive asset management, especially around linear assets and distribution assets, I think we have some distance to go there in terms of our overall journey. Analytics, as you pointed out, is going to become extremely critical from a data-driven decisions perspective. And we're going to generate, the discoms are going to generate petabyte scale of data in terms of the smart meterization of their assets. And when we build an analytics platform which is able to deliver decisions at scale, I think much of the issues that the administrators have today in understanding where the resources are getting spent or where the revenue is coming from would possibly get addressed. The other area that I see, and possibly that's something for later, is the entire concept of distributed energy resource management systems. And that's one area where I think the policy think tank, as well as the discoms, have to come together in driving this. Energy efficiency, I touched upon in terms of what the ministry was doing. But I think if you look at what's happening with e-governance per se, and if you drive a parallel to what's happening with the utilities worldwide, is that there is a lot of push towards behavioral energy efficiency. And that's something that I think the discoms will, over a period of time, address and adopt. And last but not the least is the customer experience, because at the end of the day, the discoms are in the business of providing a service to the end customer, be it domestic or an institution. And today, if you go to any distribution company today and you look at the customer experience, it is broken at places, not only for the consumer, but also the data of the consumer in the discom system. So I think, areas like unassisted service, sales, and the entire design concept of driving customer experience are areas where I think there's a lot to be achieved. But again, the caveat here is that we will need to simplify the adoption, and innovations will keep on coming. We'll have hype cycles. It'll result in a lot of technology integrations, and we need to realize that a discom is not an IT company, and a lot of these disruptions will have to be outsourced and delivered at scale. But the challenge is that the discoms will also have to exercise strategic control over these projects. Now, it's easier said than done, but I think the experiences that the discoms have had, and especially state discoms have had over the period of the last decade, has kind of strengthened them and given them enough knowledge as to how to drive better strategic control. On the technology side of things, with the advent of cloud computing, it's here and now, coupled with the right contracting structure, I think the discoms are on a path of driving success, whether it's from reducing the AT&C losses, which Mr. Lakshmanan spoke about, or reducing the SCSARR gap.
Just picking up from one of the points that you raised, on behavioral aspects, because I think that's gonna really shape how the demand is going to met by the discom, because clearly we are seeing that increasingly the load profiles have changed, and it's going to further change whether we bring in the elements of energy efficiency, or maybe because of increasing income capacity by the people, we are seeing increasingly people are installing more and more air conditioning. Load is also going to change, the peak to shift from evening to afternoons, which we have already kind of seen this year when India witnessed heat waves. So there is a lot which needs to be factored in for discoms to really do the procurement management better, or help in ensuring grid security at the same time. So given this, how do you kind of see the technology innovation or disruption playing a big role, and what are the you did adhere to some of the challenges that you witnessed maybe in the last couple of years? If you can expand a little bit on that and how we can address those gaps.
Yeah, sure, Vibhuti. And I think, see, it's very clear that the discoms are going to see an increased penetration of distributed energy resources. Even if you look around what's on the media, you'll see some of the largest business conglomerates in the country today are investing a lot in renewable energy, whether it's hydrogen cells, whether it's setting up, virtual power plants, whether it's storage cell aggregation. There's a lot of investments which is there, and it goes without saying that the discoms are going to witness a lot of distributed energy resources in their grid. Mostly from the commercial and industrial customers, and much less from the domestic ones. But it's going to be something that we need to prepare for, which the discoms need to prepare for. And I think the need of the hour for the discoms is to look at a comprehensive distributed energy resources management system, or DERMS, as we call it, which can essentially turn the distributed energy resource intermittency into a dispatchable grid resource. And that in turn can support the reliability and efficiency goals of the discom. And obviously, this comes with a lot of benefit for the discoms, because first of all, it gives you an element of predictability, whether on a day or an hour ahead basis. The distribution grid operators can schedule and dispatch nominated distributed energy resource capacity to realize the system reliability and safety benefits. And this also in turn gives the service operators more flexibility in their power procurement, driving further efficiencies into the value chain. Another aspect is, I think, on the network optimization. What we've seen so far is essentially on the operational technology side of things, whether it is the SCADA, whether it is the outage management systems or the network management systems, the kind of disparate, they're there. Those adoptions have taken place because there are SAIFI guidelines set aside by the Ministry of Power, which they have to adhere to. But we are yet to see a continuum. We are yet to see an integration between the OT side of things and on the customer technology side of things, which is on the billing and metering innovations. And finally, I think with 5-minute settlements and all of these things coming in the horizon, the market management of distributed energy resources is going to be something that the discoms are going to be faced with. Well, there is a gap. Let's face it. Okay, and I think the Ministry of Power is prioritizing things in the right direction. Because if you look at the RDSS schemes, one is the AMI adoption part of it, but also there is this huge distribution management system upgradation that's planned. And Mr. Lakshmanan also spoke about the National Feeder Management System. That also in turn lays the foundation for advanced analytics in this particular area. So all in all, I believe, we are moving in the right directions, but we must realize that, discoms will not adopt technology for technology's sake, because first of all, this has to make business sense. But also at the same time, we need to understand their existing IT landscape and what needs to happen with that IT landscape so that we can, one, reduce technology debt that they currently have, introduce more simplicity, and also integrate the continuum, starting from the assets that they have, the operational technology that they run, the metering technology that they're going to adopt, and the billing innovations they have already done in the past. Now, this continuum is innovation by itself. And whenever you look at innovation, you will realize that with innovation, people are always thinking platforms. And platforms are very critical because today we are proud to say that as Oracle, uh, starting from the asset side of things onto operational technology, on the metering, on the customer side, and also on the CX, which is backed by a solid NITE certified cloud platform. We present an unbeatable story to the discoms in terms of giving them a platform on which they can build and innovate.
Mr. Lakshmanan, coming back to you, we did have discussed a lot of elements about this revamped distribution sector reform scheme. But in the monsoon parliament session, the government also introduced the Electricity Amendment Bill 2022, which has now been referred to the Parliament Standing Committee. What, according to you, are the critical elements of this bill which can really help to transform the distribution sector?
Yeah. So this is a very important amendment in the Electricity Act. So there are many provisions that are being changed or improved upon based on what has been learned over the years. I would like to touch upon a couple of changes that are proposed in the amendment, which will have a far-reaching impact on the overall power sector and its ability to serve the consumers better. One is multiple licensees in the same area. So this provision, of course, has been in existence in the earlier act as well. But what is being attempted now is to streamline this provision and to bring about certain enabling provisions so that there is more clarity as to how multiple licensees can operate in the same area. So, for example, like as we stand today, like we have multiple licensees operating in Mumbai, whereas like it is not taken off much in other areas. So this amendment is trying to create a more enabling space and clarity, especially like in terms of the accounting for power purchase cost of the legacy PPAs. That has been a critical concern. And another thing which is being sought to be clarified is the universal service obligation, so that like there is no cherry picking in terms of new licensees who come in. That's very essential, so that there is a equal platform for all the licensees to operate. So on those lines, there are few more aspects that are sought to be clarified and enabled, so that this multiple licensees operating in the same areas becomes more feasible and doable. And ultimately, like this will bring in choice to the consumer. So that is the attempt. So retail competition and choice to consumers, this will ultimately drive better consumer service and more competitive pricing for the end consumers. So this is the overall objective of trying to enable multiple licenses in the same area. And second is trying to bring about improvements in the overall regulatory regime, especially in the functioning of state electricity regulatory commissions, which is very critical for the overall viability and robust functioning of the utilities. So on that aspect, a couple of things are being proposed. One is to introduce a law member as a member of SERC, which will bring in the legal aspects and the aspects related to law be better administered. And another critical change is the SERCs are proposed to be equipped with the powers of civil court, so that they can enforce their orders. So that will bring in teeth to the SERCs for implementing their orders. And another thing that is being enabled is to create benches in SERCs where there are long pendencies of cases, or there is the load of SERCs is more. Then there is a provision for creating benches. So that will help distribution of cases and then faster disposal of cases. And Another aspect on the regulatory side is like to address the vacancies. Sometimes the vacancies are existing in SERCs, and that actually like affects their ability to function. So there is an enabling provision which is sought to be brought in, which will enable the central government in consultation with the state government to kind of enable the adjacent SERC to handle the cases of a particular state where for any reason if it remains vacant. And apart from this, there are provisions around the RPO obligations, which will try to enforce or which will try to improve on the commitment of the energy transition which India has taken in terms of bringing in more green energy. And there are other provisions around, strengthening the national load dispatch centers, which will be very critical for a dynamic grid management. So that is being, sought to be strengthened. And just to clarify, there are no provisions restricting, free power or subsidy to consumers. There are provisions around the minimum tariff so that in a scenario of multiple licensees, there is no predatory pricing. So there is a element of minimum pricing which is sought to be brought in. However, like this minimum pricing can be brought further down with the help of state government subsidies. So state governments have their rights, but of course, like the subsidies have to be paid in advance. So there is existing provision on that, so that the DISCOM's cash flows and viability is not disturbed. So these are broadly, the key aspects of the amendment that is sought to be brought in the Electricity Act, and especially like the provisions around multiple licensees and the regulatory strengthening of the regulatory bodies. These two will, I think, go a long way in bringing about the desired improvement in the overall sector.
Right. I think there are far more benefits that one can really see by providing these enabling conditions that can really help again in turning around the DISCOM operational as well as the financial performance. In fact, that kind of we did see, in terms of some of like the tightening of screws, what we saw last week by POSOCO, which is a national grid operator, barring 12 states and union territories from buying and selling electricity at the spot market as a penalty towards not clearing their dues to the generator, which has been mounting up, over the last few years. And it has come to a condition where the grid operator had to take such a stern action. What do you think of such penalties? Will it push kind of DISCOMs to get their, again, houses in order?
I think this is a critical measure, the late payment surcharge rules, which was brought in by Ministry of Power, is in continuity of a series of steps that ministry is taking to bring in a healthy framework for the DISCOMs and the upstream utilities to operate, so that everyone is financially viable. And this is very critical for the sector to attract investments, as we are talking about the overall renewable energy targets and greening of the grid and the overall energy transition that has to happen over the next 10 years, 15 years. Unless the payment mechanism in the overall vertical of the entire power sector is adhering to a certain discipline, it will be very difficult for the equity investment as well as for the financing institutions to support this further investments that are needed in the sector. So in that context, one, we discussed RDSS. Two, would like to mention is the 0.5% additional borrowing, which is being given by the finance ministry to the states. That again involves similar kind of measures, that reforms that the DISCOMs and the state government have to undertake for availing that additional borrowing. And in continuity of that is the latest the late payment surcharge rules, which came in the month of June, which actually like mandates two things. One, whatever arrears to GENCOs was outstanding as on 3rd June 2022 is to be liquidated in a prescribed number of installments, depending on what is the size of the outstanding of a particular DISCOM. So against that, around 1,35,000 crores worth of GENCO dues have been committed to be liquidated by DISCOMs by participating in these rules and the transition financing support that is being provided by REC and PFC to help the DISCOMs to implement this rules. So against that, first installment was to be paid on 5th of July, and almost 4,620 crores was paid to different Gencos as the first installment for liquidating this arrears, which was existing as of 3rd June. And second is to pay the current dues in time. And the rules have set out a maximum period of 75 days within which Genco bill has to be cleared. So a Genco presents a bill, and discoms have maximum time limit under the rule of 75 days. And if they don't clear the current dues, and if there is even a single invoice which is under default, then there is provision for regulation by the grid operator. So that is what kicked in on 18th of August, and 13 states and UTs were regulated. So the first step for regulation is to debar the utilities which have defaulted from accessing the power exchange, and also their short-term access is closed. So this actually puts a lot of pressure on a utility not to default, because that ultimately leads to their ability to access power exchange is gone, and their short-term access is gone. So that typically leads to load shedding or regulating their power to the consumers in the peak hours typically. So which no utility would want in terms of not supplying power to the consumers. And that has had a significant impact in terms of utilities trying to clear these defaults which have happened. And if we see the last 2 days figures, which I was just going through, on 20th of August, there was a default of 1,300 odd crores. And as we stand today, this default has been reduced by 500 crores. And as we stand today, there is only 800 crores of overdue payments to Gencos of current dues. So even today, the number of states which are debarred is only 5. Initially, it was 13. That number has gone down to 5 discoms and 3 states. So we are quite hopeful in terms of the way states are responding and the utilities are participating. It is ultimately in their interest that they keep the dues, current and up to date. And the LPC rules has also provided a much needed relief to the discoms as well. On the outstanding dues arrears, which they have agreed to liquidate in a certain number of installments, the late payment interest is waived by the Gencos under the rules. So that much amount of relief has gone to the discoms as well. And once they start paying the dues in time, then I think they will avoid a huge amount of late payment surcharge, which otherwise they are bound to pay to the generators. So which is been the case in the past, the dues keep mounting, and then it adds on to the delayed payment interest on the principal. So all these things would get avoided, and ultimately it will make the power cheaper for the consumers. Otherwise, all these cost elements get added and it gets passed on either to the consumer, or it becomes a disallowed expenditure which has to be borne as an additional financial burden by the state governments. So we believe that this would be a critical reform or a critical measure to bring about a healthy financial discipline in the overall power sector.
Absolutely, because once a financial discipline is kind of kicks in with the discom making timely payments to generator, I think the financial health of generators also improves quite a lot, and the investments, the investors will find it less riskier even to invest in the generating assets, which also has been facing the brunt on account of their PPS being signed with discoms and discoms not making timely payments. I think there is a spillover effect of discoms financial health kind of having an impact on both generation and transmission sector as well. Now we are nearing towards closing this very interesting fireside chat. I would just like to end this discussion by posing one question to both of you. We did discuss a lot of elements that can help discoms turn around, and these various different schemes and amendments in the act, and even the energy conservation bill is gonna help in turning around the distribution sector. But what, according to you, is one critical element that needs to be prioritized? Mr. Das, I'll start with you, and then Mr. Lakshmanan with you.
Yeah, look, Vibhuti, thanks for asking that question. I think I'll go back to the last response on driving more simplicity in technology adoption, because that's very important, because we need to realize what discoms are and what their core competencies are. And they're certainly not around the technology area. And we got to realize that while it is very easy to desire continuity, integration across all the aspects of the value chain, it's going to take a little bit of a time. But I think when the policy think tank looks at it, and I've already said that the policy think tank is moving in the right direction, I think small running repairs are always required. And I think one area where I see maybe a little bit of a deeper dive could be done is in the area of the meter data management area, where I think the present provisions under the standard bidding document allows for multiple MDMs in a single discom. Now, typically, the MDM is going to be the single source of truth, and we wouldn't want to, increase the data silos in a discom which is already, impacted by heterogeneous technology and the integrations therein. So that's one area, and I think we've taken it up at the appropriate forum, and it's being appreciated. Similarly, on the prepaid and the postpaid front, I think see both if you look at the functionalities enshrined in both their aspects and functions of the billing engine. And I think having two billing engines running in the same discom may not be very efficient. And I think the unified billing system addresses that, and I'm hopeful that the discoms will also be very supportive in adopting this. The last aspect, of course, is that look, in the entire process, obviously with the AMI adoption, we are also increasing the surface attack of the discoms in terms of whether it's cyber attacks from outside or whether it's natural calamities. So I think somewhere down the line we also need to understand as to how we build an holistic policy in terms of driving technology or management changes to incorporate more of cybersecurity features, more on outage management features. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Das. Mr. Lakshmanan, what,
Mm.
according to you, would be the priority change that needs to be undertaken first?
I think couple of things. One on governance front, which I would say is very critical. Though you might bring in a lot of enabling technologies and enabling infrastructure, but I think the will to improve, or the commitment to improve, is the most fundamental thing, which will actually ultimately result in utilizing your technology or your digital platforms or your infrastructure. So first and foremost would be a commitment to change or commitment to improve. That would, in terms of specific actionable things, would be like, at the state level, the state governments have to be conscious of the fact that utilities are, running, operating dynamic companies. So they would need a good leadership and a stable leadership. So that would be very critical for this entire, turnaround to happen. So that critical leadership and stable leadership for a reasonable period of time, 3 to 5 years, that would be very critical to drive these changes. And the political commitment and support to the utilities is very critical, because electricity is a politically sensitive sector. So this would be very essential for us to go through this transition and change. On the operational front, I would say the prepaid smart metering, which is being started today, which is being just beginning, the journey is beginning. So successful implementation of prepaid smart metering along with the unified billing software. So this will go a long way in terms of helping the discom, navigate this energy transition as well as reduce their losses.
Thank you both so much for sharing your insights on, the elements that can help discoms turn around through different schemes. So with this, we'll bring the session to a close, and I really appreciate you spending or taking out time to share your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure interacting. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers for their wonderful insight on the topic. I must say the discussion is packed with some great information and insights and I'm certain that the audience feels the same. Now, allow me to introduce the upcoming panel discussion themed on Future of Prepaid Smart Meters, Role of World-Class Technology. Modern technologies like IoT and big data analytics offer the utility sector with robust tools enabling remote management of network equipment, granular visibility into energy usage, and distribution automation. Smart meters are helping utility firms to solve critical problems and enhance real time discussion making while developing new services and innovative experiences for customers. For this panel discussion, please welcome the gentleman Mr. Vikas Kaba, partner and lead power and utilities from KPMG India, who will be moderating this panel. Also, please welcome the other panelists, Mr. Bhadresh Mehta, Director SLDC from OPTCL, Mr. Raj P. Cherubal, CEO from Chennai Smart City Limited, Mr. Suket Singhal, Group CEO from Secure Meters, Mr. Subhadeep Ray Chaudhary, Head Smart Metering Group from Tata Power DDL, and Mr. Subrata Das, Senior Director from Oracle India. With that, a very warm welcome to all the panelists for taking out the time and be a part for this panel discussion. Now, may I request Mr. Gaba to take this discussion forward. Over to you, Mr. Gaba.
A very good afternoon to all. I am Vikas Gaba. I work as lead partner for power and utilities at KPMG in India. And let me welcome all the panelists on this panel on future of prepaid smart meters organized by ET Energy World along with Oracle Utilities. So let me first introduce the panel. So first on the panel is Dr. Suket Singhal, Group CEO, Secure Meters. I've been interacting with him for many years now. Very passionate about technology and innovations in the energy space, has been working in secure business in India, UK, Middle East, and Australia. Next on the panel is Mr. Raj P. Cherubal, CEO of the Chennai Smart City. Chennai, as you know, was part of the first list of 20 cities selected by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs back in 2016. And by now, I know several initiatives, including intelligent transport system and so on, have seen the light of the day. And I'm sure there will be very useful lessons that will come out of the metering space that we are seeing here. Third on the panel is Mr. Mehta. Again, Director OPTCL, brings deep experience in power system operation. My first interaction was with him back in his Gujarat days when he was looking at chief engineer at GETCO, again, long years back. Fourth on the panel is Subrato Das, Senior Director, Oracle India, has been very actively engaged in the utility space globally. And then we have Subhadeep Roy Chaudhary, who leads the meter management group at Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited. So again, in summary, a very eminent set of panelists with deep experience on the panel theme. And now, before I begin the panel discussion, let me make a few points with respect to how the metering space is evolving and the wider technology space that we are seeing in the power distribution. One, I think smart metering in prepaid mode has assumed a central space in Indian distribution. Now, with RDSS allocating funds as well as a time-bound window to implement, I think it is becoming very important. Second, the approach is a distinct departure from what we have seen in the past as a traditional CapEx model to a more PPP-oriented DB foot model that has been come into place. It is delivery of advanced metering system and not just meters. SBDs are in place, so there is some level of standardization in the procurement, and it is enabling, the QR enables wider participation from private sectors, from developers, from funds, and so on. Now, as many people think today, loss reduction becomes an obvious case, but frankly, the real value of the smart metering asset will emerge as newer use cases and monetization of data streams starts happening. So I'm sure all panelists will resonate with this. So for utility side, it might be revenue management, load management, network and asset management, and so on, dynamic tariffs. On customer side, hyper personalization of services and so on. And even the measurement attribute of the meters itself can be used and pave way for decarbonization in many industries if we extend it further on energy management and so on. So that is another point. Then I think the real value accretion also could come from non-utility use cases if panel can deliberate on that, on how say insurance products, e-marketplace, smart homes, automation, all of those can be unveiled as we move on. There are a whole lot of innovations that can happen around the prepaid metering space itself. Single wallet for dual fuel or multi-utility services, using mobile airtime for collections, usage monitors and syncing payment with that and all of that. So as we talk about innovations, again, one important point also is that co-opting the wider new age companies. As of now, the utility sector has not been very open to startups and this kind of space. So how that can happen. So I think these are some of the pointers I wanted to lay out. Now let me open it up to the panel first. And my first question is to Dr. Suket. Dr. Suket, you have been passionate about the metering space, have been working in this space for many, many years now. Have seen what has happened in India, is happening in India and also globally. So how do you see the space evolving in India for next 5 to 7 years, and how is it different from what has happened in UK and Australia? It's okay.
Sure. Thanks, Vikas. First, thanks a lot to ET and the Energy World team for inviting me. Vikas, as always, your introduction of me is far too gracious for what I am, but thanks a lot for that very gracious introduction. I think we must look at this program with a slightly wider lens. So I think the reality is that we have to look at this from a slightly wider lens. The distribution businesses, the distribution sector, and the supply of energy is not a viable sector and has not been a viable sector for many, many years. We've had many reform programs. Loss reduction becomes the elephant behind which these reform programs come. But I think there are a lot of structural weaknesses and structural problems as well. For progress to happen, for our country to hit the goals that it's got, the energy sector, the electricity sector is a core pillar, core foundation on which success has got to be built. And we have to ensure that we get the distribution sector investment, whether it's private investment or government investment, that doesn't matter. We have to willingly want to invest, and the distribution sector has to provide the returns for that. While I say that, I don't want to be a doomsayer. The reality is that it is an extremely exciting time. I think for the first time, structurally, the industries work together, the government of India, and we now have a structure which ensures that whoever participates in this is also responsible for the outcomes. That's a very new, and I wouldn't call it a PPP because I would differ slightly, because the conventional PPP model in the country has not really made the people participating, both on the public and the private side, responsible for the outcomes and responsible for the results, which is where this model is very different. I think we as an industry have to ensure that we make this a success, whether you are component suppliers into this, whether you are a utility, whether you are an installation contractor, everybody has to take responsibility to make this a success. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people are looking at success as, I have taken out a tender, I have appointed a system integrator, the system integrator is running a project plan. Again, I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. The reality is that in order to make this program successful, whether you're a utility who needs to do loss reduction, whether you're a utility which needs to improve service, whether you're a utility which needs to improve quality of supply, depending on your method, it is important that all three things are done, but not just by appointing a system integrator, not just by ensuring that the project plan is running. You have to think of dense deployments. You have to think of the process changes that you have to make as a utility, and each component supplier within the environment of the metering system has to make in order to enable those changes. In my view, there is a deep misunderstanding that smart metering is just about bringing a kilowatt hour meter read or a monthly load profile back and making a bill out of it or running something. The reality is that for the first time ever, and I can tell you this, we haven't seen our customers in Australia, we haven't seen our customers in UK or anywhere else successfully do this, make process changes. The meter has always been an integral part of it, but it's always been something that's been remote. It's always been something that's read once a quarter or once in 2 months, at best once in a month. Now, utilities have the ability to make the meter an integral part of their IT systems and to use the meter to run a lot of the processes that were being run hydraulically, manually, whatever way you want to call that. And I'm not sure, and I've seen this in utilities all over the world, they haven't been able to make the switch because again, there is a very siloed thinking. There is a meter manufacturer, there is a IT system provider, there is a utility system provider, there is utility. There have been only 2 or 3 utilities in the world that have been able to span the entire bridge and take everybody and say, look, guys, let's make this change. Let's drive this change forward. And I think if we do that, not only loss reduction, which again, I believe is a small component of the change that we need to drive because only a few people have that problem, we will be able to transform the utility system to drive our net zero goal. And more importantly, create a new industry participant that is the service provider of advanced metering infrastructure to drive international investment into this. Because there is, you can debate whether it's 1 trillion rupees or 3 trillion rupees. The range is something like that. The reality is nobody in the country, the government or the private sector has money to invest, that quantum of money to invest in order to make this a success. So we got to get international investment in. Lastly, what I would say is there is one barrier which is going to cause issues to change and also to implementation, and that is the structure of our tariffs. I think as an industry, we've got this far. We now need to work on simplifying our tariffs, and we need to now work on ensuring that the tariffs that exist for industrial, commercial, and residential customers make it easier to implement this program rather than hard. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Sukhet. I think interesting thoughts, and I think what comes out clearly is it is a partnership approach that is needed, and then creating reform areas where wherever there is bottleneck, debottleneck that and create it and make a conducive environment for making it a success. Now, let me come to Raj. I think the smart city implementation, if I draw parallels, it's a large transformation at scale. And when we look at Chennai, it has a large expanse, the 400-year-old legacy and so on. So you heard about what transformation we are looking at in the metering space on bringing a partnership approach, how this also, again, this meter touches lives of consumers and is again sensitive in that matter, in that nature. So what is your experience of learning and implementation on range of digital interventions and smart city interventions, and what are lessons you would want to bring to this industry, which you have learned on the smart city side? Raj.
Thank you so much for inviting. First of all, our involvement with metering is from a funding point of view. So we work with the electricity utility and the water supply people, and we helped fund the smart metering. And it's very interesting that 6 years have gone by from the start of the smart city in Chennai. And today it sounds so, no big deal to talk about smart metering. And I was forcing myself to remember what it was in 16, 17, where all this was brand new, at least for me and many other people I was to speak about. A lot of problems were not in the concept of it, but the proving of these meters. And there was a lot of debate I remember being part of, where is it RFID, various kinds of network. Everything is brand new at that time. So what works, what doesn't work, does the industry know what it's talking about? All these issues came up, and there's a radical change, right? From going out, tried and tested metering to suddenly somebody's talking about smart metering, and taking that leap is not easy for a system. Any system. There's a lot of risk involved. Luckily, both the Trangetco, which is the electricity people, and the water people took that leap. And from what I can see, people are happy, public is happy. So, for example, I'll give you a few examples very quickly. In T Nagar, I think they're implementing around 1.5 lakh meters, one phase, 2, 3 phase, etc. It took a lot of time trying to get it certified, etc. But now that it's happening, it's moving forward. Like Suket pointed out, I wish, I'm not an electricity expert, I'm not a water expert, but I would compare this to the smartphone. So today, nobody thinks twice about smartphone. Everybody has a phone, and many people have smartphone. And imagine the transformation that's happened in the last 10, 20 so years. And I'm old enough to remember the rotary phone, and you only have one supplier. You have to beg and borrow to get a phone in your house and so on. From there, it's like no big deal anymore. You just walk into a shop, buy a phone, and just go home, right? I would love to see that happening in the electricity and water places, especially in the context of global warming, climate change, etc., etc. A lot of this is now theory, but to translate it into reality of saving the planet or whatever, you have to make these utilities and other auxiliary systems more dynamic. So for a simple example, solar panels, right? In every seminar, I point this out. In a country drowning in solar energy, we hardly have any solar panels. You look outside your window. I'll challenge you to find one solar panel. Then we'll immediately talk about net metering, gross metering. Then we'll talk about regulatory problems. So if you analyze piece by piece, everything is stuck somewhere, right? As a consumer, as a citizen, all I want is a solar panel because I care about environment. So then then I'll complain that I don't have 8 lakh rupees sitting in my bank to go buy solar panel, and so on and so forth. We tried to implement solar panels here, and it was a interesting nightmare, subsidies, left hand, right hand, etc., etc. So my point I'm trying to make is that smart metering, yes, important, because first of all, as they say, what you can measure, you can't manage, and that is the starting point of a lot of the utility problem, from what I can see. Whether it's water, whether it's electricity, sometimes the meter doesn't work, so you don't know how much water the mall is using, which is a loss to a citizen, loss for taxpayer, loss for the utility, and so on and so forth. But if you were to go one step further and say, look, I think Cognizance and Infosys have these green ratings, so they're forced to buy, let's say, wind power. So they are able to sit at home and say, look, I want wind power from Thoothukudi, and they're able to get it. My question as a citizen is that how come I'm not able to do that, right? So those kinds of issues, which will be like a dynamic transformation of the market, where consumers start choosing. I'm willing to pay a little more for wind or whatever, as far as my meter is able to tell me what I got when. That's one thing. Second thing is, even in the larger context of demand management, consumer behavior change, and even the utility efficiency, I need to start seeing my own data, right? I mean, it's a famous example everybody gives is, you tell me about polar bear, etc. I'm not going to do much about global warming. But the moment you tell me that everybody around my house is using 100 unit, I'm using 200 unit, my brain starts thinking about how to save electricity or water, which means you need to have data, which means you need to show me in a readable format which appliance in my house is causing me this trouble, and so on and so forth. So like Suket pointed out, we are in the tip of the iceberg right now. There's so much to be done, and I'm not sure when that will get done. Which means we need to start thinking in system terms, not in terms of meter versus wiring versus network. The entire transformation objectives need to be in mind, then work it backward to say, okay, what does it take to bring about that process and systemic changes? It's doable, I suppose, because if telephones have changed, I'm sure other industries and sectors can change. But I think we meaning all of us, whether industry, government, etc., we need to start thinking in terms of those systemic changes. The last piece I would say is that there's always this fear of privatization versus government. That also, I think we need to clarify that, we are not handing over water or electricity to some private guy and saying, let's depend on him. It's about how do we bring about operational efficiency, even from an environment point of view. Government democratically should control water, should control certain things, but that doesn't mean we can't bring efficiency into various sectors, thereby helping the taxpayer and citizen, thereby helping the environment. So I think we need to have a holistic approach to all this, and I hope we will get there sooner, as soon as possible.
Sure. Interesting thoughts. And I do have a follow on the data. I don't know if you have time for the follow on, or if
Yeah, please.
I can. Yeah, so I think since you have to leave, just a follow on the data. How have you enabled data usage across? And are you encouraging within the smart city perspective third parties to come in to use that? What are mechanisms that you have used to enable use of data?
Sure. So right from the beginning, thanks to people like Mr. Kunal Kumar in Delhi, part of the ministry, we've been trying, and some of the cities have been trying to see, can we make Chennai, let's say, a sandbox for innovation, for people to, whether it's an NGO, whether it's a startup, whether it's a company. Typical problem, I used to be an NGO earlier. So typical problem you have is everybody runs in circles trying to find the same data again and again and again. Consultant comes in, he spends 6 months collecting data and failing and so on and so forth. So we figured, okay, we can't pay people money or give funding for startups, etc. But what we can do is collect data, put it on a open data platform, and let people use. Let's give them permissions and typical government permissions that get stuck here and there. Let's help them out, so innovation will happen in the city. Number one. Two, we are going to face a major problem, good problem to have, that is, like you told me, like you were in the introduction, there's a gigantic intelligent transportation system project. You have all these smart metering coming up. As part of the ICCC, which is the command and control, you have all these rain gauges and all kinds of IoT sensors, etc., coming up. Everybody is creating data. Now, the problem is, you think from a citizen or an official or a politician's point of view, data in itself has no meaning, right? What are you going to do with data? You want actionable intelligence. Commissioner in the city wants to know, okay, what do I do about it? Utility MD wants to know, what do you do about it? And so on, right? Even public wants to know, do I take left turn or do I take right turn? Tell me if there is a roadblock ahead of me. So I think that converting into actionable intelligence is where we are struggling. Use cases are there, but problem is you have 10 different systems, or the system integrator has been bought in with certain specific time frame, and we'll give X rupees to do this. Now suddenly some startup comes and says, you plug my tool into it, but the system integrator will say, no, that's not part of my RFP. So I think there's a big churning happening in this whole data sector. I'll put it in a positive way, because it's a nightmare, but hopefully something good will come out of it. Theoretically, we should be already using artificial intelligence, machine language, etc., to start seeing patterns. Which kid is going to drop out of school, which tree is going to fall tomorrow, which part of the city is going to get flooded, etc. Theoretically, all this is possible. Practically, it seems to be a little bit of a data nightmare. I'm hoping piece by piece, let the data happen, and slowly you put layers on top to make sure that some intelligence comes out of it, so that utilities can be more efficient, or the city government can be more efficient, and so on and so forth. Improve services, save money for the taxpayer, help environment heal, and so on and so forth. But it is a data nightmare right now, from what I can see, because we have data. If somebody asks us what to do with it, even I don't have very little idea. So theory and practice is far apart. We need to somehow drag it together and bring it together.
Interesting. I think the very fact that the problem is coming to fore and is exposed now, that we need to do something about it, and we've still crossed, I think, still reached a stage. So very interesting. Thank you. Let me move on. I think I'll come to Subrato, you. I think you have also seen the metering space now evolving, and prepaid is something that you also have a very strong play at. Now, what are the innovations you have seen on the prepaid side of things, and how customer can benefit, customer utility can benefit from these innovations on the prepaid meter side? And why I ask so is that a lot of it will happen while both options will remain in India, but a lot of it is happening in prepaid mode.
Thanks for that question, Vikas. I will be a little opinionated on this, so pardon me for speaking my mind here. First of all, I think it's great to see the Ministry of Power institute this payment method with a lot of purpose in the RDSS scheme. So if I look at it prima facie from a revenue recovery, revenue protection, billing efficiency, these are the KPIs. It's beneficial both to the discoms as well as to the consumers. Okay, because on the demand side of things, one gets to have a fair idea of one's consumption, and psychologically one gets kind of engineered towards energy efficiency and thereby energy savings. But I believe the structure to the rollout could do with a little bit of a rethink here, given that we will continue to live with, as you rightly pointed out, both postpaid as well as prepaid existing side by side. We need to also be cognizant of the fact that the IT adoption of discoms are at varying stages of maturity, and their ability to transcend the technology debt presented by this move to prepaid will need to be given the due consideration, because billing as a discipline, prepaid or postpaid, you know, is a singular subject, and that must be dealt with singularly. You just can't, punch one with the other because it's convenient. I think their REC's move towards unified billing has the potential to address some of the concerns that arise. But I'm confident if this is adopted with the required diligence, it will make the transition smoother for the discoms and its consumers. And obviously, you talked about the kind of innovations that we are seeing in this space. Look, I think it's a bit of a known game, because what has also happened parallelly is that our payment systems in India have also evolved greatly, because we are storing money in different ways. We are storing money in cash, in bank accounts, mobile wallets, prepaid debit cards, mobile airtime, and of course the prepaid utility balance. So there is innovation around giving consumers more flexibility to convert a wider range of stored money into prepaid energy credit. But all of these heterogeneous systems then need to be integrated. And I haven't seen those areas being covered to the extent needed in some of the RFXs that I get to see. And most of these applications, payment applications that are there in the country today, are microservices based, and the prepaid engine needs to be scalable enough to address the technology and accounting challenges posed by these integrations. I think with my confidence that this will work stems from the fact that today the India stack, the technology platform based on which these payment systems work, is firmly in place, and integrations should not be too difficult. So that's on the innovation side of things. And we also need to understand that this move towards prepaid also presents a wider choice to the consumers. And then the concept of omni-channel, consumer interfaces also comes up, right? And they're delivered by smartphones app typically. So element of customer experience such as unassisted service, dashboards for disaggregated energy consumptions behind the meter, and behavioral energy efficiency programs, they need to ride alongside the prepaid payment interfaces. And these elements would further need a rethink from a policy advocacy standpoint. Well, the benefits to the discoms is a no-brainer. With direct debits, obviously, there is a lower likelihood of missed payments and transaction failures, but they do happen. And the systems must be resilient enough to prepare for that eventuality.
Sure.
But on the customer side, because I think we need to understand that the customers need to feel comfortable with the business, with the discount, given that they're sharing a lot of personal data with them. This may pose a problem, because once we see deregulation coming into the industry and we see multiple retail providers, and I as a consumer have an option of switching providers, I will be a little reticent about sharing my personal data as far as direct debit is concerned with a host of distribution service operators. So that's on the GDPR side of things, there is a little bit of concern, but I think with the security in place, this can be addressed. Overall, I think we set the right foundation. A little bit of policy advocacy, a policy rethink would propel us in the right direction, because.
A follow on, maybe Suket, you can also add. If on the direct debit side, I think the direction when this was formulated, the direction was absolutely clear that we need this for the security of the players that come in terms of cash flows. So the thinking and intent was clear. But how are you seeing things play out? Are there issues? Are you looking at it? Is there a general receptivity towards this, or is it difficult to implement? Suket, you want to add anything on this?
I think I'd agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Das that Because prepayment is being thought of as a microservice-based um, application being done in the backend, there are a number of different challenges about data reaching at the right time and the veracity and the completeness of the data. But I think if you think of implementing prepayment in a slightly different way, if you let the meter do the accounting on its own, which also exists as a standard, it's an IC standard, then that removes all the issues. To me, prepayment is critical. Direct debit is critical because there is this belief that the Indian customer forms a part of the won't pay bucket. But the reality is there is a very large can't pay bucket. Their in personal cash flows take a hiccup. They don't have a job for 7 days, all of those things. And that derails every part of their energy spend. And if you can give people a mechanism of paying as frequently as they want, as little as they want, then they don't fall into the can't pay bucket. And then
Exactly.
it just keeps the billing efficiencies and all of that going. So if we think of making prepayment in that way, and that's why it's been so successful with mobile phones, is because it's purely focused on 2 rupees, you can pay me 20 rupees, you can pay me 200 rupees, you can pay me every day, you can pay me 4 times a day. And that's what we've got to aim with on electricity as well.
Absolutely.
Let me now come to Mr. Mehta. Uh, as system operator, you also have seen metering evolve, again, wider technology implementation in SLDCs. In fact, within power sector, I think the ULDC scheme and so on was one of the first to take up large scale technology interventions when it was first done. And I've seen you talking about even basic technology measures, like in one of the sessions earlier, you pointed out that availability of meters, the ABT meters with a USB and so on, those things also you have mentioned in the past. So what is your experience on this space in the system operations space? And we do have Suket also online here on the specific metering part and query that you had raised there. Mr. Mehta.
Let me just, first of all, I thanks Vikas and ET for giving me the opportunity to share my views over here. Let us take a look what is available today with respect to billing system of the consumer at the distribution level. Sir, there is a data center, there is millions of customers. What is the computational facility we have? One reading at every 60 days or every 30 days. That my only computational facility is there. But I think Socrates rightly said, now let us bring that computational facility on the meter itself. Sir, meter should able to do this because when we go for a smart metering, it will be hourly computation, it will be a multiple tariff during time of the day also. It may be a auto credit if the DISCOM announce some concession. I'm going to come more and focus on that also. So that type of computational, if it is built in at the meter itself, if we look back, today's smartphone has much more computational facility than what the telephone exchange servers are having. Airtel or the Vodafone servers are having. So that thing will come and that will give a very big and very good result to this. Now let us come to the what is required is that. Say we all have tie-up for the green energy. Many distribution company and regulatory commission has announced the green tariff also. People are going for green power also. So day by day, we are concentrating more on the green power. There is a choice of wind and solar, and prominent is the solar. Now, as per the nature, it is not available during the night time. But if we go for a zero neutral, if we want to go for a carbon neutral or zero emission, then we need to harness the solar during daytime. Now, it's possible that at time it may not be required for me to use it also. So there are two alternatives to that. First, I try to shift my load from other time of the day, non-solar time to the solar time. That is shifting of the requirement of power or demand or the load. And another thing, I go for a storage option. Now, what has happened till the date that people are tempted to use the power only as per their convenience. They will not much bother about whether it is suitable to the distribution company, grid operator or the utility to harness, to deliver the power of the right quality power at its doorstep. But now the day has come, we have crossed 100 GW for the renewable and the target for 2030 is very high, 450, 500 GW. So at that time, a day will come, sir. We need to shift our requirement of power from the evening to the daytime. Maybe washing machine may be operated, something may be operated during daytime. Then how do we, then what is the way to change the habit of the common people? Sir, I need to incentivize them. I need to pay them concession. I need to charge them more during peak. I need to charge them more during non-solar hours. I need to give lot of concession incentive during that. And it's possible that the requirement of power and availability of power changes drastically. And when it is a case of renewable, it highly depends upon the environment. So how much concession will be there? Probably it will be announced every day morning. Well, it will be announced a day before tomorrow. So at that time, what will happen that a set flag will transfer from the DISCOM to the edge consumer meter. It may be a prepaid meter. By allowing certain shifting of load, that prepaid meter will grant some credit to that consumer automatically. So that day is not far, and that will only able to, for a grid operator like us, we'll able to balance the grid only with that. So that is a need of time, and that will only, Suprata has rightly said, it's not only a meter to measure the kWh. It's not only that. It is also doing all tariff computation with lot of if and buts, demand, time of the day. And what we need is, this is not so facile or simple to implement what I'm thinking for tomorrow. We need
Right.
a lot of infrastructure facility. We need a lot of support from the regulatory commission. Today, what has happened, sir? If we call back the days of RFP, DRP, probably the country has invested more than 10,000 crore rupees. What is the outcome of that? Still, monthly billing is prepared at everywhere. Meters are used for collecting the data for 24 hours reading, but they are Sigma and billed for 1 month, one reading for a month. So who is earning out of it? A smart meter manufacturers earn. We are not utilizing the feature of that. The IT technology has earned, servers people have earned, data centers earned, communication people earn. Due to lack of tariff, due to lack of change in tariff by the regulatory commission for the particular area of the distribution company, this has resulted into that. So
Yeah.
it should not happen, and for that we have to take a holistic look. So I'm of the opinion that tomorrow is the day for prepaid smart meter, which is capable to change the policy and tariff as per the instruction and advice of the distribution company guided by the regulatory commission and the availability of power and demand. And that will facilitate everybody in a win-win situation, sir.
So I think very interesting points again, how we leverage the infrastructure that is created and then couple them with more behavioral insights, behavioral stimulus, and incentivization and other kinds of stimulus that can alter or elicit desired behavior. So again, interesting. Let me now come to Shubhadeep. Shubhadeep, as TPDDL is at the forefront of implementing technology, one of the early adopters of technology across the board. How are you seeing the metering space evolving, the decisions that you have taken as TPDDL for metering, and how does it fit in the larger organizational goal and as larger organizational strategy? Shivadeep, over to you.
The thing is, I agree with a few points, I disagree with a few points. The reason is, uh, we have around 3 lakh smart meters and very few takers for prepaid meters in India, rather in Delhi. Over here, largely because Delhi happens to be one of the richest states of the nation, and people prefer postpaid metering. But prepaid metering, I absolutely agree with Mr. Das and Mr. Singhal when they say that you can fill as little money as possible. So we are doing that, and that being done, things are happening. In our model, we have both the prepaid metering solutions in non-smart and smart scenario. The non-smart scenario was very difficult, was pretty difficult for us. The reason is we had tariff change once a year. Along with that, 4 times PPAC used to come, which meant that is inside the meter, I have to upgrade the software so that it calculates correctly, which meant I went to this prepaid consumer 5 times for tariff changes. If in case he or she comes to buy token from me at that point of time, I need not go, I put a few additional punches in. But with smart metering, and I have thin prepaid solution where the meter does not compute, the computation is at the back end. And the mode of payment is like, it is an advance payment. You can pay as low a sum as 10 rupees. You can pay as high a sum as 50,000 rupees, if in case you want, or furthermore. So looking into that, prepaid is a wonderful solution going by that. But like it or not, the consumer psyche. If in case a consumer wants to have a prepaid meter, he or she should be allowed to have it at all points of time. Going ahead, as I see over here, well, in the evolving metering space, both prepaid and postpaid solutions will stay. Because if in case you go by the erstwhile feelings of India being a welfare state and choices be given to the consumers, we will have to serve whatever the consumer wants. And if in case you go by the idea of consumer is king, even then you have to give what the consumer wants. So both the solutions are ready, both are available, you can have the calculations. Game changer, game changer for a utility is installation of smart meter itself, sir. Whether it's a prepaid, whether it's a postpaid, it hardly matters. When we started our journey, even then, we were a single digit AT&C company. Presently, our AT&C losses are somewhere around 7%, which goes on to mean very simply that if in case we have a business case which is dependent upon revenue collection, well, it doesn't make any sense. What is the cost of reading a meter in Delhi? 7 rupee 50 paise. And what is the cost of a SIM card rental? It's more than that, right? So our business cases cannot be dependent on that. Our business cases cannot be dependent on that. So data-oriented decision making, that is what is required today. The days of hunch and intuition are gone.
Right.
And once you are looking for consumer engagement in the entire process, once you're looking at the consumer engagement at the entire process, you will have to trust him. You will have to give him the data so that he or she can. As Mr. Raju was saying as well, that as long as I do not have a peer-to-peer consumption, as I will not be able to do something. So we have made all of that. The customer touch points of all of us, except for 4 or 5 offices that we have, has gone online. And all the apps, etc., people are seeing their own bill, they're questioning. They're questioning what went wrong at this point of time in my consumption, please tell me. So this opens up a new avenue of home automation as well. Consumers demand interval meter data now, sir. And
Right.
if in case you are looking for distributed generation, that cannot be possible without integration of smart meter data. I think I have given you a part of our roadmap.
I think you present
If
an
in case you need any further.
important picture of how things graduate over time. First, get the base infra right, and then whatever option is available, enable that. But then customers will get eventually mature, and choices will be dictated by how customers want it rather than what I know and what the technology can do for them. So interesting.
Yes.
So I think next round of questions is I have a common question to all the panelists, and maybe due to paucity of time, if you take just 1.5 minutes to answer it, is that what can data do for you? What can do for the customers, do for the stakeholders at large? And what are the emerging immediate opportunities that you are seeing, and then long-term opportunities, and what are necessary imperatives? How it can be opened up? It's okay. Maybe you can come in first.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, because I think I would agree with Mr. Rai Chaudhary. There isn't an acceptability or an acceptance for prepayment. And I think that has got to be the first step. If we want to avoid people getting into can't pay, we have to use the data that is available correctly to ensure that prepayment becomes the model of choice in energy, because it will really transform the ability for people to invest. Then secondly, I think, Mr. Raj mentioned that he equated the rotary phone and calling for a connection. I think at the very basic level, every utility in India has to start there. How do I make my process really slick for my customer? How can he come in and get a connection like walking into a shop for a mobile phone? And then a few more, there are a handful of utilities which are a little bit more mature, which can look at driving electricity volume, because our volume, per capita volume, is tiny. And really, in order for industrial progress, we need to drive that per capita volume up. There are a lot of things that can be done to drive that per capita volume up.
Sure. Thanks, Agat. Mr. Mehta?
Sir, the data which has been captured so far and which is being captured need to analyze in various angles. It may be a data related to discom-wise consumption with hourly pattern, seasonal and day of the day, week of the day. It may be for an individual consumer to judge the behavior pattern of the consumer in various category of the consumer. And we need to, once we have all this analysis at our front, because ultimate aim is that we need to rearrange our consumption of the power pattern with the incentive or the penalty or subsidizing or the rising the tariff for certain time of the day. So unless we have the realistic view of the hourly consumption of the various category of the consumer, part of the discom or each state has a multiple discom at their disposal and a type of power with a various conventional plant and the renewable plant, we'll not able to decide. But the time has come, sir. Now if we take, we have enough data with us, we have enough chunk of data, we have a lot of smart meter. Probably the day will come when the number of smartphone in the country will be one for each population, the one for each family will be the smart meter in the country also. The day are not very far, and that will give us a realistic picture for the judging how much power I need, how much I have to store, and how much I have to use. And that will give a very practical purpose in terms of investment in the power plant, in terms of investment in the network, in terms of commitment for the power and fuel arrangement for the conventional project also. So a time is there, we need to go for a large scale of the BI type of data analysis, we need to have data mining, and we need to have a whole sub data crunching methodology, sir.
Subrata, your thoughts?
Well, you see, I mean, it's very clear that you know, whoever's going to kind of roll out smart meters over a period of time, and given the kind of demographies that we have, we're going to generate petabyte scales of data. And we are right now essentially looking at revenue protection, billing efficiency, and all of these things with the smart meter, which is base, and we are probably geared in the right direction. But I think, in my experience, or having worked with some of the utilities which are slightly ahead in the technology adoption curve across the world, let's say, for example, in Japan, there are a lot of related benefits that they are making out of the data that they are crunching, sometimes on real time, sometimes on the legacy data that they have. And one of the areas where I see a lot of these data generating value for the discom is in the area of measuring power, quality, understanding where the voltage and current waves are causing power distortion. So you can proactively spot inefficiencies in the system, minimize the ratio between real and apparent power. So that's one area that we could possibly also explore. And then the real-time power consumption data especially when you've disaggregated and consumers become more demanding in terms of wanting to know which particular white good in the house is drawing what kind of power. And then both the consumer as well as the discom is able to make data-driven decisions to streamline energy consumption and save on their annual utility bills, for example. The other area, and this particular topic has been beaten down across the smart city theater, across the smart utility theater, is that of asset management. But we still haven't got there. Yes, there are a lot of people who are putting in IoT sensors into devices, understanding vibration, all of that, and trying to build a predictive maintenance scenario. But that's another area that really needs to scale, because we are generating the kind of data that we should from the assets. And once you have smart meters, your operational device management, your distribution assets that you have, field force automation, and areas like device management, device replacement, and other things become very important from the point of view of how you can manage the smart data. And obviously the distributed energy resource management system, because the number of prosumers, if I can use that word loosely, which is both a consumer and a producer, is going to increase drastically in the country, and that's going to create issues with the grid stability. And that'll need the discom to look at the data that they're generating in real time, as well as the data that's there to do the distributed energy resource management. Now, I'll stop there because I know you wanted me to be a little, short on this.
Sure.
But
Thanks.
you need a robust technology platform, and I see a lot of my fellow panelists here talk about the technology, and sometimes I also step back as a technology vendor and think, look, who's my customer? Who is the beneficiary of the technology? It's a discount. Is technology their core competency? No. So I think you need a robust technology platform, and we at Oracle Energy and Water, supported by the Oracle Cloud infrastructure today in the country, we present a continuum that's unbeatable today. And at the end of the day, Oracle as a company is known as a data company, and we can really make this work for the discoms of the country.
Right, interesting. So, Pradeep, maybe an added dimension. Have you seen instances of third parties coming in, or you combining with third parties on the data and using that as a monetization platform or offering new services to the customer? Have there been instances of that?
We have given them new services on value-added services. But as things are going, I would like to say something. You will find it interesting. I have swapped 500 transformers this year just by studying the load pattern of smart meters, which are also installed on my DTs. 500 DTs swapped. 8 DTs would have burnt off had I not used the data properly.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what he was saying is that the operational insights from the data that are coming in, they have had immense benefits on the transformer.
Absolutely.
What I got to see is one is the load pattern and optimizing the transformer usage, and second was outage prediction, where again you have had immense benefits. So, so we'll come back to you. I think we are now at the top of the hour. Just the last round, slightly. I think what I want to say, ask everyone is just in few words, one change or one wish on this segment, the way things are going, that you would want to wish. Quick, just few words and phrases, if you could just quickly comments. Okay.
Consistent deployment across the country.
Okay. Mr. Mehta.
Vendors should drive a open protocol to harness the full potential of the meter for today and tomorrow's application.
Subrata.
I think it's the appetite for risk and the need for a fail fast approach, because when you're inculcating an innovation DNA into your organization, especially if it's a discom, I think both political will and the appetite for risk needs to be present and demonstrated.
Great. Subhadeep is missing, so I can add one possibly that I think the partnership approach between vendors and utilities, to me, I think is an heart of this. Along back years when I went first to the metro DMRC, and Mr. Sridharan said that success of contractor is our success. So that statement has always stayed. I use it often, but I think that is very important for this. So I think thank you for some really interesting points and discussions that came out of this. I would like to conclude by quoting a famous historian, American historian Arthur Schlesinger, who said that future outwits all our certitudes and possibilities are more than various than human intellect is designed to conceive. So I think that is what we are seeing, innovations happening at one end, but huge gap at other end, but everybody being pulled. And there are many examples where once we have embraced the change, innovations have happened fast, stakeholders have aligned well, data sharing has happened, and cost to reach that goal have also come has been lower than anticipated. And I do hope we see this on the smart metering and the wider digital adoption space as well. So with this, thank you very much to everyone, to all the panelists, to all the audience for patient hearing, and good day to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vikas Gaba and other panelists for sharing their experiences, thoughts, and views on the topic in detail and with patience. So this brings us to the end of this knowledge sharing conference. I am sure for all of you who have joined with us today, this conference will leave you with policy takeaways and some key information. On behalf of ET Energy World and Oracle, I want to extend to you Our thanks to all our attendees and speakers for taking out their time and the insight they have shared. Goodbye and stay safe.